And good evening. Welcome to AITQR Mini Mic. Tonight I have the great pleasure of welcoming back the criminal defense lawyer Robert Knightley. He's also an author and a former New York cop, New York patrolman from the beat in the 1960s and 70s. And on our last interview, which you can find on YouTube and on AITQR page, Robert talked to us about his time as a rookie cop and his formative journalism years in college and joining the Army. And tonight we have him back for round 2 of this 3-part series. So let me give you a little back history on him just in case you haven't seen the first interview. After college and the Army, Robert Knightley joined the New York Police Department in 1967. He patrolled the streets of Manhattan and Brooklyn for 18 years during the time of the Knapp Commission, which was a commission about police corruption. He knew the reformer, Frank Serpico, and also the notorious Prince of the City, Robert Leuci. In 1989, he joined New York City's Legal Aid Society in the Criminal Defense Division. And after that, for 30 years, while working as a defense lawyer, a public defense lawyer, he also became a published author, the head of the American Mystery Writers chapter for a period, and a copy editor and advisor to many young up-and-coming scriptwriters and authors. And he also wrote pilot shows for Aaron Spelling. So, quite a mouthful there, Mr. Knightley. Good evening and welcome to you. Thank you for being on the show. It's great to have you back. Our first one was so captivating that I actually got almost lambasted by your wife earlier on today when I was doing sound check, who informed me that there are so many stories you have to tell us that I didn't get it all in on the first interview. And so we've made this decision that after these 3, we're probably going to do some really long, in-depth stories with you, because literally over your 60-year career, you have some of the most intriguing stories I've ever heard. So we are going to dive a lot deeper, but tonight we are doing a mini mic, which is meant to be 15 minutes, always ends up being 30. And we're going to start with Robert at the age of 48 years old. Now, at this point, Robert has just retired from the New York police force. And we're going to head off to a Caribbean island called Curacao. But before we do that, Robert, tell us a little bit about your formative college years as to how you became a writer. Because before we get into criminal defense law, I do want you to share with us how you actually trained to become the writer that you are also today.
Well, actually, it started in grammar school. I was a top-notch composition writer. That's what we call them back then, compositions. And I was always interested in it and good at it. And continued in high school and in college. Also, I worked on the college newspaper, the St. John's News, as a reporter and a writer, and took creative writing courses, and was always interested in writing. Was always a writer and a reader. They went together. I read all the writers I thought I should or appealed to me, and that probably shaped my writing more than anything else. Actually, I thought that being a kid who grew up in Brooklyn in the 40s and 50s, I thought if you were a writer, you worked for a daily newspaper. And that's what I did for a while. In the Army, I worked nights. I was assigned to Puerto Rico, San Juan, Puerto Rico, after basic training as an English language instructor. And I had my nights free, so I worked on the San Juan Star as a nighttime proofreader. And while it was the only English language newspaper in Puerto Rico, and it was started by its first editor was William Kennedy, the Albany novelist, famous novelist of many books, and he's still around writing them. And I only knew him from a distance as I sat at the copy reader's desk. And at the time he was writing he was part-time on the newspaper and writing his famous Albany novels. When I moved to Albany, I looked him up. He was the heart and of the Writers Institute in Albany, which was an extraordinary organization, and he founded it with his MacArthur grant money, and invites writers to speak at SUNY Albany from all over the world.
Wow. Wow.
I looked him up at one of those meetings, and when I first got to Albany in 2008, and introduced myself as someone who'd worked with him on the San Juan Star. Of course, he was bowled over and invited me to dinner with him and the local writer at the time who was speaking. And we've been friendly ever since whenever I ran into him. He's quite a writer, and he writes about Albany the way I write about New York.
Which is where we're going tonight, is your writings about New York and also your remaining years in New York. I'm going to share a photograph. This is what happens when Robert leaves the police force. He passes the bar exam and he decides he's going to take a wee holiday before he moves on to the Queen's Criminal Courts, where we're going next. So take a look at this photo. Let me share. I would like you all to meet Robert. He is in Curacao, which is in the Southern Caribbean. And as you can see, he's holding an iguana. And this is just the beginning of the very strange and wonderful stories that Robert has to tell you, because he's not shy. And
neither is the iguana.
You passed the bar exam. How many times did you have to sit it?
Twice.
Wow, that's impressive. What drew you away from the police force and towards legal defense?
Well, I've always been a writer and intent on writing, really writing about my experiences, and I didn't want to spend any more than 20 years in the NYPD. I didn't want to give them the rest of my life. So I was eligible to retire. I was a lieutenant at the time. I retired, and intending to practice law. Since I was admitted to the bar now, I got to Fordham University Law School at night while I was a young cop. Out of curiosity, I'd never intended to be even when I graduated law school and when I passed the bar, I had never really thought about practicing law any more than I had thought about being a cop when I was a young man. The furthest thing from my mind. But as things worked out, I just got inclinations. I sort of followed my nose to the police department and then to law school at night out of curiosity. I liked law school. Fordham was a hell of a law school and it was a good place to go. Well, I handled that building was the criminal courts in Queens County. It's on Queens Boulevard in Kew Gardens, Queens. And during those 13 years in Queens, I handled thousands of criminal cases and more than 50 criminal felony trials to verdict in front of juries. And that young man was one of my clients. And he kind of exemplifies what most of my clients, was the fate of most of my clients. They never intended, often never intended what happened to do what they did or what happened as a result. However, in that case, a death resulted, and the consequences are heavy.
Do you find that this had an influence on your crime writing over the years?
Oh, yes. Actually, I went into police work, I believe, went into law and became a criminal lawyer to listen to the people involved, to hear their stories. And I have not been disappointed in the number and the texture of the stories they've told me, and that I've gotten to participate in. I've always been a writer, and early on, when I was in college, I got the idea that in order to be a writer, you had to have something to write about. You had to have a life to write about, experiences.
Hallelujah.
So I set about getting those experiences, and so I ended up a newspaperman, a policeman, and a lawyer.
I want to touch on one particular sting that comes to mind. You were somewhere in Brooklyn. You did a raid, I believe, with fellow patrolmen on one particular cafe or bar where you knew that there was crime kings were there, and there were weapons concealed under tables. Do you remember this story?
Yeah, sure. That was an arrest I made in 1977. It was in Bushwick, Brooklyn. It was a Hispanic social club around the corner from the Italian social clubs. One of the mafia families was based on Knickerbocker Avenue in that neighborhood in the 70s. And I was part of a team, a unit of four cops like myself, led by a sergeant. We were a uniform team, and we ran a dozen registered informants who gave us information, and we handled the heavy lifting that an ordinary police car could not handle because they were answering radio calls. We had no radio calls. We set our own goals, and we arrested hundreds, thousands, drug dealers, gun dealers, people simply carrying guns, and counterfeiters, and chop shops, order yards where they steal a car and they hack it up and sell it piece by piece.
Right.
I did that from 1977 to 81. And it was an extraordinary experience. Oh, and this social club we raided that night, it was in January, it was cold. And we burst in, we had a search warrant. I used to draft our search warrants, and we'd go down to court at night to a friendly judge, and he'd sign. I'd bring my informant with me, and the judge would sign the warrant, and we could avoid the district attorney altogether. So that night we raided the club, and as we went in, we saw two non-Hispanic looking men at a table, and which was out of the ordinary. And I saw that one of them had dug under the table, put his hand on the table, where I found a loaded Beretta automatic. And they were arrested for the gun. It turned out the man I arrested, the guy with the gun, was Joseph Mad Dog Sullivan, famous hitman. The FBI says he did 30 murders for the mafia mob. The man with him was a soldier from the around the corner mafia family, and obviously he was setting up another hit. I arrested both of them, took them to night court, and of course Sullivan was he was on lifetime parole for murder.
Wow.
And he had been
lifetime parole
for murder, and the reason he was out was because of his of the friendship he had made with his attorney. The attorney who showed up in night court was Ramsey Clark, the former U.S. attorney. Ramsey Clark showed up. The DA had been saying, well, here's this lifetime parolee for murder. He's going right back to Attica. Oh, he was the only man at the time to have escaped from Attica when he was a prisoner there.
You are so lucky they didn't take you down.
Well, I was so lucky there were 4 other cops with me.
Oh my goodness. This is what I'm talking about, viewers. This is what I'm talking about. Robert has some of these stories in collections, and later on we're going to talk about how to make his work more available to all of you, because he really has some fascinating stories. I do remember now it was Mad Dog. I'd forgotten his name. So thank you I'm so glad he didn't shoot you. Goodness me. Definitely very corrupt days. Let's take a look at Robert in his home office where he worked on a lot of these ideas. Here he is in Jackson Heights. He's looking very defiant. And I'm going to take you over to this little number, because there's a story behind this. We're going to jump between that look and this look. So you get to see the teddy bear inside Robert as well. Now, this cat plays an enormous role in Robert's life. This cat's name is Bullet. And why is it called Bullet, Robert?
Well, the name was inspired by the movie Bullet, stars Steve McQueen. You know, Bullet is always racing all over San Francisco, up and down the streets. When I first met Bullet, he was a kitten asleep in his box, and Bullet never moved too much faster than a sleeping cat.
And Bullet had a sister called Quasimodo.
Quasimodo was Bullet's sister. They were both a couple of weeks old kittens in a box in the basement of the abandoned Gouverneur Hospital on off Grand Street and the FDR Drive back in 80, roughly 80. The hospital had been abandoned at that time, that building in any case. And a friend took me to the basement, a woman friend who was looking to find homes for these kittens. There were 5 or 6 of them. And when I got down there, this little cat kept getting under my feet. All the other cats were in a box with their mother, but this cat was off on her own, running around, and she was crooked. Her body was crooked. I figured out later that the mother had rejected her because of her deformity, as they do. And I kind of felt the cat was appealing to me to save her, you know, which I did. I took her. I took her, and I took her sleeping brother, Bullet, for her company. I named her Quasimodo after Quasimodo, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. And Quasimodo straightened out in a month. She had had a concussion, the vet said, and she was all right after a while. And they lived a ripe old age. Quasimodo, the age of 16, and Bullet, the age of 17. They were house cats in Jackson Heights, Queens apartment building where we lived.
And I had the pleasure of meeting both of these wonderful animals, and they certainly loved to live amongst a lot of books, because there were a lot of books in that apartment. Here we go. Now I would like you to meet Santa Claus.
Yeah, Santa Claus.
Tell me about the helicopter. Does anybody else know another policeman that actually arrives in a police helicopter to be Santa for the local children?
Went to precinct duty from a soft job I had. They dumped me out into the 83rd precinct in Bushwick, Brooklyn. It was 1975. They called it Operation All Out because the city was going bankrupt and they had laid off 5,000 cops. So they needed fill those police cars. So I went from the legal bureau as a attorney trainee to patrolman in the 83rd precinct in Bushwick, Brooklyn. It wasn't a shock because I had started that way in the 9th precinct, 1967, 68, 69. In any case, I almost as soon as I got there, it was around Christmas time, the precinct union official told me I was going to be Santa Claus at the precinct Christmas party for the children. And I said, but I've never done that before. He said, you'll do it now. And he gave me the uniform. And he told me, and I became Santa Claus for the 6 years I was in that precinct. And what they would do is they would, that day, they would fly me out to, they would drive me out to Floyd Bennett Field where the police department kept its helicopters. Put me in a helicopter and fly back in a helicopter to the church, appropriately St. Nicholas Church, in a park in Bushwick near Grand Street, and the copter would lower all the way down to the almost to the ground, and they let me go down a rope ladder with the bag of toys on my shoulder.
Wow.
And it seemed like a couple of hundred kids all around that and the helicopter in that park waiting for me.
Tell us about this little girl here. I know that may be a separate incident from that particular Floyd Bennett Field.
She's the daughter of the sexton in the Quaker Meeting House in Flushing, Queens, where my wife and I, we were Quakers in those years. In fact, we were married in that house,
right?
In that church. The first time I played Santa and she came through the door and the mother was taking off her coat and she shrugged out of the coat and ran all the way across the wood plank floor and leaped into my arms. I was in uniform.
Right.
My mom told me that she, after that, she would never cotton up to the Macy's Santa Claus.
So, Robert, now I want to move to Queen's Noir. Do you happen to have a copy of it with you at the moment? Everybody take a look at this. This is the most fabulous collection. Robert Knightley is the editor of this collection of short stories about Queens. And I worked with Robert just as a technical assistant on this book. And there were a series of books, Queens Noir, Bronx Noir, Staten Island Noir, Brooklyn Noir, and then eventually the entire anthology has been presented in a fabulous hard copy called New York City Noir. And I recommend it. It is the most enthralling collection of crime writers that you could come across. It really is. And Queens Noir is a fantastic one. Robert, is there a particular story in this book that you'd like to... I keep thinking of the Irish family with the dead body in the bar down below.
My favorite story is in that book. It's my story. The nice part about being the editor of an anthology is you can include your own story in it, you know. So it was called First Cavalry, and it's about a boy who steals that's the crime. He steals a dog carriage from a little girl in the street, and wheels it home, hides it in the lobby, and he's seen by he's about 8 or 9 years old or younger, and he's seen by the women he lives with, particularly the strong-willed and disciplinarian aunt who makes him take it all the way back. And I won't tell you the ending. It's based. It happened. It was me. It was me, and I love doing that story. In fact, the sixth grade, and when I got up to Albany, the sixth grade in the grammar school, one of the local schools, I was giving a talk to the Friends of the Albany Public Library, and this twin lines of little children come in the front door, with a woman who's obviously their teacher. And she had brought them here because she had read my story to them in class, and she wanted them to meet me.
Oh, goodness, that's absolutely beautiful. Robert, your experience as an editor overall for these crime stories, did you find that I imagine there were a lot of stories that you had to choose from. I do recall that one of my jobs was to like second read them and even give you an opinion of what I thought.
My technical editor.
Yeah. But my question to you is, because you have this incredible background as a former patrolman and then a defense lawyer, did you find that you gave some leeway to your writers when they were writing about crime and they didn't quite get it right with regard to the references to how the legal system worked or the police? Or did you just like literally disavow that story and move on to the next one because you were irritated in any way by their inability to understand how things worked behind the scenes? They were so caught up in the concept of carrying over this story to the public.
Well, no, most writers don't really write stories that involve the nitty and gritty of criminal cases in the courts, except one of the writers there,
Alan Gordon.
Alan, thank you, Alan.
My pleasure.
How can I forget him? He was a fellow lawyer at Queens Legal Aid Criminal
Right.
Defense, and he was an author in his own right. He wrote a series of crime novels, mystery novels, with the characters. The Joker is his character, medieval character. And well, Alan knew his stuff. But most of the writers wrote about crime out in the world and not inside a courtroom. And they wrote about characters, motivations, and dastardly deeds, and they didn't need a lawyer to advise them about it.
You weren't tempted?
No, I wasn't.
I'm envisaging these copy notes with, you didn't quite get that right. It doesn't work like that. I don't know.
No, the last thing you want to do is mess with another author's work.
Unwritten code of writing. As you can see, I'll probably never make it to the great level of being a crime writer. In our next interview, we're moving to Albany. You leave New York, and we're going to take a look at your very long writing career in Albany and also your continuing work as a defense lawyer, working with immigrants in Albany, which is also really fascinating material. We're going to go there for the next one. Our time is actually up tonight, and I would just like to ask you if there's anything you have to give us, to take us out on tonight, that's coming to mind for you from your time in New York, before you came to Albany, an impression that you have of I would say your formative writing years in New York.
Well, New York is the place to be when you're young enough to be there. Once you get into your 70s and pushing 80, you want a slower pace, and that was Albany. Right. Of course, once you leave New York City, in New York State, the only other city of substance is Albany.
And you don't stop working. You're 80 in November, correct?
Yeah, right.
And I talk to your wife a lot, and we can barely keep you still. You just don't stop working. You really are phenomenal. And it's really an honor to have this opportunity to talk with you in depth. I really do look forward to going even further in depth in some isolated interviews with regard to separate stories, because the wealth of material that I've read of yours over the years really leaves us plenty of pastures to move in. So that's exciting. I thank you tonight, sir. I'm going to show everybody, I'm going to share the screen one last time for a photograph of you that I just think characterizes you as a writer. Here we go with our...
Carrie, was fun.
our little share screen. Don't go anywhere. If I can, there we go. One last photograph. This is Robert when he arrived in Albany, looking very, very professional. And this is a hard one to see. It's very small, but it's on the back of his books. But it really is a beautiful photograph of you, Robert. And this is as you were presenting Queen's Noir and signing it at a book reading, I do believe. And we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. And in the meantime, this will be up on YouTube in the next couple of days. And we'll send out a link for people so they can follow your story. And we thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. I'm Carrie Beehan. I'm the host of AITQR Mini Mic. AITQR is a community theatre group in New York. We work with immigrant artists and stories of displacement. And Robert Knightley has been the supervisor for our script. And that's how we know him. All right. Good night, everybody. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.